Bibles, iPads, iPhones, Droids, turn to 1 Peter 3:15. 1 Peter 3:15. Peter writes to the church, he says, "In your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you." So basically he's telling the church, hey guys, we need to always be a reason. We always need to be able to give a reason for the hope that we have. We need to know the reason why we believe what we believe, and that Yahweh is the true God and Jesus Christ is his son. He says, yet you do it. When you do it with gentleness and respect. Do it in love. And so we've been asking the question. We haven't, a couple weeks ago, started this series of 25 reasons that I believe Jesus is my Lord and Savior. My Lord and Savior. 25 reasons Pastor Scott believes. The reason I say that is because these are the reasons that I believe, and the whole point of this series is to encourage you to come up with your own reasons and know your own reasons. I'm not saying you have to jot down 25 reasons, although that's a great exercise. That's what I did. Went and jotted down 25 reasons that I believe Jesus, and that's how this series came about. But I encourage you to know, to be able to articulate, because the sad truth is with a lot of Christians, we don't know why we believe. And I'm not saying that those who don't know why they believe, I'm not saying that they don't truly believe or that they aren't Christians, but it becomes more of a blind faith, right? We also need to be careful. Like I tell my boys, there comes a point in time where your faith has to become your own, right? It can't be your parents' faith. It can't be a family tradition, right? It can't be just something like we need to ask the question, are we just going to church? Are we just doing this Christian thing because our parents did it and our grandparents did it? Or because we live in America and we're one nation under God. And so we need to know who it is we believe in and why we believe. It can't be a blind faith. It can't be a faith that's been passed down. It needs to be our own. When it boils down to it, yes, faith is trusting in someone that we cannot see, but it is not a blind faith. And when we have our reasons, our faith grows stronger. And when our faith grows stronger, remember the analogy I gave the first time in the first message, it's like a puzzle. I look at faith as like a puzzle, and I've got this puzzle and I've got these pieces in place, and some of them are based on knowledge and logic and reason, but others are very experiential, right? Things that I've experienced. This is a personal God that I've experienced, and those later down the line and other messages, those are going to be a part of the reasons that I believe as well. And as we start to put these pieces in place, we get a clearer picture, right? And our faith grows stronger. So that's what this series is about. We started last time with what we call general revelation, and we're carrying on with that in this message as well. And at this point, I have said nothing about why Jesus Christ in particular is my God, the Son of God, and why he is my Lord and Savior, right? I've just been talking about reasons that I believe in God, because it starts there, right? If you're telling somebody, hey, Jesus is Lord, you need to follow him, well, I don't believe in God. So we need to start with a belief in God, right? That there is a God, right? That God exists. And then we can get into what's called special revelation and why Yahweh is that God and his son is Jesus Christ. And so in the first message, just brief recap, I talked about one of the reasons for me is the uncaused first cause. That everything that is coming to existence, everything that exists had a beginning. Everything that came into existence had a cause. It had something that caused it. For instance, my coffee that I'm drinking this morning, right? It was made out of coffee beans, and those coffee beans came from a plant, right? And that plant came out of the ground from another bean or seed or whatnot, right? So everything, you can trace it back. It had something that caused it. And if you keep going back to the beginning, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You want to look at that. If you want to say a big bang, what started that big bang? There was an uncaused first cause that started everything. That was the first of the 25 reasons. I do have more than 25 reasons that I believe, but these are 25 that I jotted down. The second for me was just the cosmos itself, the universe itself. When I look at what all God has done and created, to me, it's like looking at a turtle on a fence post, right? If you were walking through the field and you saw a turtle on a fence post, the first thing you would think is like, oh, how did that get there, right? And so when I look at the universe, I say, man, how did that get there, right? And I believe that God has put that in each and every one of us. I believe that to not believe that somebody did that or somebody created that, that comes from outside forces, right? We have to be taught that, right? So that's the cosmos. And then the third reason that I talked about last time is our privileged planet. Just to have life on this planet, the sun's size, distance, and age, right? The Earth's tilt, the moon. It's like the perfect size and distance from our planet. The other planets, the roles that they play, our oxygen, our water, just the list goes on and on and on of what comes into play in order for there to be life on this planet. So those are three of my puzzle pieces. I'm going to continue on this morning talking more about the human body. And remember, like I said last time, I am not a science expert. I am not a scientist. I don't pretend to be a scientist. I am a pastor, right? My expertise is more in theology, right? And which is more of a soft science, I guess, but I am far from a scientist. In fact, in this room, there are individuals much smarter than I am in the scientists. My father-in-law, Terry, Brandon, my wife, and I'm sure there's others of you that know more than I do when it comes to science. So I don't pretend to be a scientist. But you don't have to be an expert in every field to know the reasons that you believe what you believe. Does that make sense? There's a lot of things that I know. The light bulbs come from electricity in this room. I don't think it's just magic, right? I couldn't tell you the ins and outs of how all that works, but I know that these lights in this room don't just appear magically, right? I know there's reasons that they're here. It's the same with some of the reasons that we believe. And so when it comes to the human body, I'm fascinated. The human anatomy, I'm fascinated by what God has done through the body. But there's someone in this room that knows a lot more than I do, and that's my wife. And so I want to invite her to come up and share with you guys for a little bit.
About this subject about 6 or 7 years ago, and he was like, hey, you want to get up and do a crash course in human anatomy and physiology? And I was like, yeah, how much time do I have? And he was like, oh, about 15 minutes. And I'm like, it's not a lot of time, but I will try to do it in the best way I can. For those who don't know, I'm a speech language pathologist. Speech language hearing voice pathologist is the actual really long name. We don't write that down. The reason why we're called pathologists is because we actually do define and diagnose and treat. So that's what I do for a living. I work in the hospital. I have worked with what I like to call diapers to diapers, from NICU babies that are just released from the hospital to people right before they pass away in their old age. And so I deal mostly with the geriatric population now in the hospitals, but I thought maybe the easiest way to go about this would do a pretty systematic approach and go through the systems of the body. So we'll start with the human skeleton. When you think of the human skeleton, you're going to think of structure and support, right? So we've all seen skeletons before. That's your bones, and that's what you look like at your core. At birth, the human skeleton is made up of 300 bones. So what Candy has in her belly right now has 300 bones. When we're done and into adulthood, we end up with 206 bones, and that's a lot less bones. It's not like we're losing bones. It's just you need certain bones in infancy to be able to pass through the birth canal, and we need those to not be fused until a later time, right? And my rad tech up here is probably going to chime in too. So in adulthood, we have 206 bones. Bones don't move on their own, but they're kind of like the curtain or the hanger in which everything else in the body hangs on. Human bones grow continually from birth to our mid-20s, and our skeleton is at its max density at about age 30. You have the axial skeleton, which is your skull, your spinal column, and your ribs. And everything else, like your shoulder girdle and your pelvic girdle, that's also housing some of your organs and protecting your organs. Like our skin, the human bone is constantly worn down and remade. So every few years, you're going to have brand new bones. That's pretty sweet. Bone marrow makes up 4% of a human body mass. It makes red blood cells. That's all that gooey stuff. So when you bite into a chicken leg and the red stuff that's in the middle of the bone, that's your marrow. So it actually creates blood and most white blood cells and some lymphocytes. Bones are held in place at the joints by muscles and also connective tissue like tendons and ligaments. But then you have this cool stuff that's at every joint called cartilage. What's cartilage for? The cushion, right? And it keeps those bones from having friction against each other. And it's really, really complex, and it's actually designed to last near lifetimes unless you overuse them, right? So cartilage is really cool, and it's at every single joint of bone. Like our skin, we said that it's remade every few years, so it just recreates itself. Bones are held in place at joints, muscles, joint surface area to prevent bones from rubbing. Muscular system. Muscle is soft tissue in the body of humans and animals, and its main purpose is to produce force and motion. So whenever you go to a chiropractor, and I really believe in chiropractic professionals, but if you really want lasting change, you're going to have to work on the muscles because bone doesn't move bone, right? Muscles move bone. So in order to get really lasting effects, you need to be able to rehab the muscle. Y'all with me so far? Hanging? There are around 650 skeletal muscles in the human body connected to bone by tendons, joints, and again, cartilage. There are 3 types of muscles in your body, so not all muscles do the same thing. So you have voluntary muscles, like that you need to pick up a jug of milk, right? But you need a different kind of muscle in the heart to pump, right? But then you also have smooth muscle that's actually in your digestive tract. So it undulates and does what we call peristaltic movement. So it will actually move food like this down your intestinal tract. So you don't need those same kind of muscles that you would use to pick up a gallon of milk to move mass through your intestinal tract. So the most hardworking muscle in the whole body is what? The heart, by far. By far. So I'll put this down for a second. I've got a thing of tennis balls here. Let's see. Jordan? Bradley? Squeeze that real hard. Is it easy or hard to compress? It's hard, right? How many times do you think you could do that and get tired? 12 times to squish that before you'd really like, oh man, that's a lot. Yeah, go ahead. Tell me how much it takes. That amount of pressure is the amount of force that your heart uses to pump blood through your body. It's insane, right? It's a lot. Guess how many times it does that a day? 100,000. 100,000 a day. 2,000 gallons of blood a day. In your lifetime, your heart beats 2.5 billion times. Do you know how much a billion is? My engineers in the room know. My accountant knows. A billion's a lot. So a billion seconds ago was 31.5 years ago. A billion minutes ago, the Roman Empire was in full swing. A billion is lots. When we throw out that number, it's like Elon Musk has $1 billion, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot more than you think it is. 2.5 billion times your heart will beat in your lifetime. So yeah, you only have so many ticks, but imagine doing that 2.5 billion times. Your heart is incredible. So arteries, when you think of arteries, you're gonna think away. It's carrying oxygenated blood away from your heart. Veins, you're gonna think of void of oxygen. So it's sending deoxygenated blood back to your heart to get reoxygenated again. If you wanna camp out on anything really amazing too, oxygen or gas exchange in the body. Just camp out there for like a week and figure out how that happens. It's insane. Digestive system. So this is my jam. This is what I deal with mostly. So I deal with, on a daily basis, I deal mostly with feeding and swallowing disorders, but also deal with brain disorders like cognitive impairment, stroke, encephalitis, traumatic brain injury, things like that. But digestive session, that one's really like my favorite. So Carter, if you could bring up the video, don't start it yet. I'm gonna give a little bit of an intro. So this is what we do on a daily basis. They're called modified barium swallow studies. My rad tech knows. What is it gonna tell me, Heather?
A lot. How the tongue is working. It's gonna show you how food goes down the esophagus. Anything comes up, anything gets stuck.
And where are we looking for primarily? Whether air goes where? Or whether water and food goes into, don't want it there. So you have these parallel systems in the body. You have your esophagus and your trachea, and they're parallel tubes, right? One's the food tube and the other one's the windpipe, right? But you don't want those contents to cross. That's bad news. So I'll show you what a modified looks like. It's like a motion x-ray. We take different consistencies of food and we coat it in liquid barium, and then we have you chew it up and swallow it, and then we can see how it's going down. So I'll show you all a little bit. Normal swallow of here, food enters the esophagus, so it needs to go as close to the spine as possible, not the trachea. So that's a thin substance, and they swallow it okay. This one, caught, whoop. See that flat part, that kind of shelf? That's your vocal cords. So what you don't know that happens there is it takes such synergy and motion. The fact that you can swallow typically is a miracle in of itself. Everything that has to happen, and when we measure those, we measure them in milliseconds to see whether they're timely or not. Because any inefficiency at all in that process, and you end up with aspiration pneumonia, right? So a lot of my elderly patients that come in, we're looking in their chart for pneumonia. Come in with pneumonia, we do one of those on them, figure out that something's amiss. So what has to happen is everything in those two tubes, right? This one folds and compresses against itself to protect your airway, so that food and water is only going to hit the path of least resistance and go down one pipe, right? So you definitely don't want it going in the other side. So that's what I deal with on a daily basis. But the way it's supposed to happen is you chew and swallow food, it goes down your pharynx, into your esophagus, and then into your stomach. Well, what happens in the stomach? Stomach has 5% hydrochloric acid, which breaks down metal very effectively. So there's also this little part that's right at the end of the stomach And it will neutralize the acid of the stomach because it can't pass into your digestive tract because your digestive tract is alkaline. It can't handle the acid. So the whole point in that little part right there at the end of the stomach is to neutralize acid, to go into an alkaline environment. It's bananas. You think we just evolved to that level? No, that would take billions of years, right? And billions and billions and billions. So just the fact that that little mechanism is there tells me something. So your small intestines is where you get the nutrients from your food. So it's pulled out, it passes through your blood system and all to the rest of your body. Then it goes into the large intestines. And the large intestines is responsible for pulling out fluid in your food so that you're hydrated. All that happens without you even having further thought about it. And then it goes on to the end, and you can pretty much guess what that is. The endocrine system, this one's kind of jacked in me. When I was pregnant with Zane, I had thyroid cancer, and I lost all of my thyroid, half of my parathyroid, a bunch of lymph nodes in my neck. And so outside of my reproductive organs and my pituitary gland, I'm pretty much completely synthetic endocrine, which is your body's hormones or your chemistry. And if you've ever had these off in your life, you really respect it. You have like 30 hormones in your body. It tells your body how to act and how to respond to stimuli and whether you're happy or you're sad. So a lot of mental health comes from the hormone imbalance too. So I'm almost completely synthetic endocrine. So I know that mechanism really well, and I respect it a lot now that I know that it's disordered. The nervous system is the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. So the brain is your control center for everything in your body. It has 4 lobes, 2 hemispheres. It's connected by a communication highway so that the 2 hemispheres can talk. It's called your corpus callosum. And the 4 lobes is your cerebrum. It's what you think of when you think of a brain. Gray, kind of smushy, wrinkly. Then you have the cerebellum, which is the old part. It has to do with your balance and posture and body positioning. I want you to hang out there. Remember that part. Balance, positioning in space, all of that. And then you have your brainstem, which is all your like life-sustaining autonomic system. It's running your body, your breathing rate, your heart rate, all of that. So in 2015, one of the world's supercomputers took 40 minutes to simulate 1 second of human brain activity. 40 minutes, a supercomputer. 40 minutes for 1 second of human brain activity. At the time of birth, you have more brain cells than you'll ever have in the rest of your lifespan. Use them well. Respiratory system. This is another part that's my jam too. As a speech therapist, with the feeding system, we also deal with breast support. So air comes up through your lungs, through your trachea, and at the top of your trachea, that shelf that I showed you, that was your vocal cords. Those sit at the top of your trachea. So for people that can sing, like my Katie girl, your vocal cords sit like this at the top of your trachea. And they move according to an effect called the Bernoulli effect. The air coming up your trachea sets them in motion. They pop open and close, and they move like this. Well, your vocal cords lengthen and shorten, and that's how you get pitch. Just that little movement. Lengthening and shortening, and you get this beautiful pitch. And the way that we shape that sound is called a resonance. So when I had thyroid cancer, I lost, cancer had invaded a nerve. I lost my recurrent laryngeal nerve, and they had to cut it, and I lost a vocal cord. So that meant that one of my vocal cords is paralyzed open, and the other one is trying to move and approximate it. That's how you cough. It's how you bear down when you weight lift. You can't do that without your vocal cords. That's how you stop that airflow and build up that pressure to be able to lift a weight or anything at all, right? So they came and moved my paralyzed vocal cord to the midline and put a prosthetic in it so that I have my other vocal cord can approximate it and I have a voice. It's very different. I don't have a lot of variation. I can't sing, but I have a voice nevertheless. So I deal with that aspect too. So vocal cords just that tiny little space tells you can sing and change your prosody and gives you the harmonic voice that you have and the way that they move and fluctuate. Gives you the voice, the authentic voice that you have. It's amazing. So after 4 minutes without oxygen, your brain dies. So hypoxia is not enough oxygen. So I see that with a lot of my pneumonia patients. They come in with hypoxia. I need to make sure that there wasn't anoxia. Going through that gas exchange, how your blood passes through your lungs is oxygenated and goes back over to the rest of your body. The immune and lymphatic system, this is your body's defense against the dark arts for all the Harry Potter fans. It will actually, you have certain cells called T cells. And when a pathogen enters your body, fungus, parasite, virus, bacteria, whatever, when it enters the body, it will attack it, and it will keep a memory of that pathogen and a memory of what it used to fight it, so that the next time that same pathogen is entered into the system, it has a memory of what it used, and it can fight it again. That cell has a memory. I cannot make this stuff up. Another aspect of my job, this is not one of the systems of the body, but it's hearing. So you have 3 sections of your ear. You have your pinna, which is this part that actually helps to catch the sound and shape it into the ear canal. And then it bounces off of your eardrum, which acts very much like a drum, and it moves the 3 smallest bones in the human body, your ossicles. And it moves it through the middle ear and into the inner ear. And you have this thing called a cochlea. It looks like a little conch shell. It's all bound up and rounded up together. And then you have these 3 rings called semicircular canals. And so they actually go like this, and like this. That, along with, remember when I was telling you about balance? They tell you whether you're upside down, sideways, or standing straight up. The sound that comes in through the eardrum, it vibrates these little hair cells in the fluid in your ear, in that little cochlea thing, and they vibrate at certain frequencies so that you know what sounds you're hearing. And it takes that information up the auditory nerve to the brain. And then the brain perceives that sound. And that's how you hear all these different frequencies. All of that is in a space about that big in your skull. It's insane. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Everything about you. So when I talk about anatomy and physiology, this is how I found God. I grew up in a Christian home, but at some point, like Scott was saying, your faith has to stop being your parents' faith and it has to become yours. So when I went off to college, it was kind of like a clean slate for me. If, God and I were going to find each other, it was going to be somehow. And I found him studying us. And the kicker to that is I only ever see what's disordered. My field, Heather's field, Dee's field, we're all in the medical field. Our field wouldn't even exist if not for the fall. Might drop. Wouldn't exist. I only ever see what's disordered. And I don't think that you can gain a true appreciation and understanding for what your body does on a daily basis, constantly, without you even knowing it, until you see when it goes wrong. And then you respect exactly what goes right. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, for sure.
Here you go, babe. So again, in knowing why you believe what you believe, am I saying you need to go take an anatomy class like Courtney or get into the science field. No, not necessarily. That'd be cool. I mean, if you did take an anatomy class, you probably learn a lot. But I mean, it's really, really complicated, right? And to me, that's the point, right? So one of the reasons that I believe what I believe, we could get into details, but I could also say, hey, the human body is really, really complicated. And for me, that's one of the reasons that I believe there is a creator. And one of the reasons the body is really, really complicated is because of its program, DNA. Anybody in here love documentaries? Any documentary nerds? Yes, those are my people. Sweet. I love documentaries. I could watch documentaries all day and all night. I especially like true crime documentaries. And one of the things about some of the true crime documentaries that I've watched is since the 80s, since we've really began to understand DNA and learn more about DNA, man, you know how many cases have been pulled back out, right, and solved because of DNA, right? I mean, DNA is like a fingerprint, but a lot better, right? And we leave traces of it behind, right? And so cases have been solved, cases have been overturned. There's been people who were innocent or thought to be innocent that were actually guilty, right? And there's also been people that are in prison that have been freed from prison because of DNA evidence. DNA is fascinating. The National Library of Medicine says the information in DNA is stored as a code made up of 4 chemical bases. So it's these 4 chemical bases, and they form a code depending on what order that they are in. Human DNA consists of about 3 billion bases. Man, that's crazy. Courtney was talking about all the things going on in the body. Just think about in one strand of DNA, and more than 99% of those bases are the same in all people. So all human beings, all of us, 99% of our DNA is the same. It's what makes us human, right? So that's the code. That's God's code to tell us that you're a human being is in that 99. But then that 1% is what makes Katie, Luke, Pat, Brad. Isn't that cool? Like within that 1% is what makes us unique. And so the order or the sequence of these bases determines the information available for building and maintaining an organism. It's similar to the way in which letters of the alphabet appear in a certain order to form words and sentences. So you have the letters of the alphabet, you put them together in a certain coherent order that makes sense, right? And they start to form words, and then they start to form sentences, paragraphs, and books. DNA works a lot like that. It is information. It is directions for our body. It's a program. It's a code and program. I think it's so cool the more we get into technology and as human coders and we start coding computers, right? And I mean, our world is so technologically advanced and growing more and more. We see how God's designed. There's a code that is there. In the form of DNA. This code identifies you and it instructs your cell's behavior. DNA is like a software program sitting in the tiny nucleus of a cell. Your DNA is full of information. So with that in mind, in terms of we've talked about cause and effect and the uncaused first cause, or if you want to go into the realm of the evolutionary process, where did this information originally come from? James Wallace says a single instance of information arising from anything other than intelligence has never been identified. So basically, whether it's hieroglyphics, whether it's information in a book that you're reading, a computer code, information in a radio signal, it's an intelligent designer at the helm. It's like when we're listening for radio, different signals out there, right, in space. We're looking for intelligent information, right? We're not just looking for static or whatnot. We're looking for certain patterns. That's the way information works. And it's because when we see those patterns, then we can detect intelligent life. Psalm 139, 13 through 14 says, God, you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, God, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made, as Courtney quoted. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. Your DNA is your blueprint that God has made to design you. Your uniqueness is not like, it's like a snowflake, right? Or a fingerprint. It's unlike anybody else's in the world. In that 1%, that's so cool. In that 1% of your code is your uniqueness, and it's unlike anybody else's in the world. This code says who you came from. It traces who you came from, and also it can tell who you will create. It's a miracle. It really is a divine design. God tells Jeremiah, says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And then my third reason for today, also my obsessive compulsiveness came up earlier in the title slide. It's supposed to say reasons 3 through 4, not 1 through 3. But obsessive compulsiveness does not equal perfection. So my third reason for today, which is really reason number 6, are babies. I just think babies are fascinating. And for me, I don't have a lot of science behind it, but just when I look at a little baby, I've always thought, oh my goodness, that's the fingerprint of God. That's God's hand at work. The babies are a miracle. And for me, I don't see how anybody can look at a baby and not see God's work. I don't see how an agnostic or an atheist can look at a baby and say, my goodness, there has to be a God. That's me. When a baby smiles or laughs or giggles or flirts, I just see God's design. Jesus said in John 16:21, he says, when a woman is giving birth, she has sorrow because her hour has come. But when she has delivered the baby, she no longer remembers the anguish for joy that a human being has been brought into the world. There's something about babies that are just children, period, that are just, we recognize them as a gift, as a present from our Creator. In fact, Psalm 127:3 says, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward from God that God has given us. Whitaker Chambers, in fact, it was looking at his own daughter that started his wheels turning. It's the way that God began to speak to him and show him that that he was real, and it began his departure from communism to Christianity. He said, my daughter was in her high chair, and I was watching her eat. She was the most miraculous thing that had ever happened in my life. I like to watch her even when she smeared porridge on her face or dropped it meditatively on the floor. He said, my eye came to rest on the delicate convolutions of her ear, those intricate, perfect ears. He said, then the thought passed through my mind, no, those ears were not created by any chance coming together of atoms in nature. They could have only been created by an immense design. He said the thought was involuntary and unwanted. He says, I just crowded it out of my mind, but I never wholly forgot it or the occasion. If I had completed that thought, I should have had to say, designed presupposes God. I did not then know that at that moment, the finger of God was first laid upon my forehead. Jesus says in Matthew 18:3, he says, truly I say to you, he's talking to his disciples, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. You know, there's just something about children that's God's example to us. Their innocence, their wonder, their trust, their simplicity, their curiosity. And when you think about it, if you really think about it, their wisdom. What do you mean? I mean, you think like wisdom comes from age, or we know that wisdom comes from the word of God, from fearing the Lord and seeking him. But the wisdom of children, that they recognize what's truly important. And so why does Jesus say, unless you become like little children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven? He's saying you need to become more like little children. You need to get back to that simplicity, that curiosity, that wonder, that innocence, that trust, right? That's what faith and trusting me is all about. You need to get back to what's truly important in life. And so, at the end of the day, it is a childlike faith. That's what God is looking for. It is faith. Faith is believing in the things which we cannot see. A few days ago, Courtney and I, it was my first time. I couldn't believe I'd never saw it. I thought I'd seen parts of it, but I'd never seen the Polar Express. And we're watching the Polar Express. It's about a boy who is struggling with his belief in Santa Claus. And his parents are recognizing it. And so he goes to bed at night, and suddenly he hears a train pulling up outside of his house. There's no train tracks, though. And he walks outside, and he sees this big, huge train. The conductor tells him to get on board. We're going to the North Pole. He hops on, and it's kind of his adventure of seeing the magic of Santa Claus, right? And that Santa Claus exists. And so he goes and he has this experience at the North Pole, and then he comes back home. And when he wakes up the next day, he has this bell that he brought back from the North Pole, and he can hear the bell, but his parents can't hear the bell, right? And so over the years, his parents, their belief starts to wane, and well, theirs is already gone, but even his sister, who didn't go to the North Pole with him, as she grows older, her belief fades, and he's the only one over the years. All his friends, none of them can hear the bell anymore, and he's the only one that can hear the bell. Is that the type of faith I'm talking about? No, not exactly. I'm not asking us to believe. I mean, we truly believe, we know that our God is real. I think if we're here this morning, maybe some of us are curious, but we would say that we believe in a truth. This is the truth, right? It's not a fairy tale that we're trying to make ourselves believe. It's not magic, right, in that sense. Although God did some miraculous things and Jesus did some miraculous thing, we believe this to be reality. We believe it to be the truth. So no, faith isn't like that. That's not what a childlike faith is. That's not a childlike faith. It's not believing in some sort of story or fairy tale, right? The other day I saw a video of Anthony Hopkins, the actor, and he was giving a word of encouragement. He was saying, just believe. You gotta believe. No matter what, whether you're a Christian or Muslim, or whether you're agnostic or atheist, just believe, because the brain can't tell the difference between what's real and what isn't. So it has the power to change things for you. Is that what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a childlike faith? No, that's not what I'm talking about either. Although I do believe, I mean, as Courtney talked about with the human anatomy, the brain is very powerful, right? And it does. And I believe in positivity, right? And I remember when I used to play football when I was in high school and stuff, I would envision myself sacking the quarterback, or I'd envision myself making the play, because your brain is powerful in that way, right? And so whatever we're trying to achieve in life, if we envision those things, yes, your brain has power. God designed it that way, but that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about faith. And I think Anthony Hopkins may be onto something, but I also think that this is very dangerous. The enemy's at play. He's wanting to convince us, if he can convince the world that that's really what faith is, that's something that works for those Christians because their brain is powerful, and if they believe that, it's going to be good for them in their life, but I don't really need that. I can believe in a different way. That's not what faith is, right? We have a real, tangible God that he wants us to trust in him. There are reasons for our faith, or at least there should be reasons for your faith. You should know the reason for the hope that is in you. At the end of the day, faith is the assurance of things hoped for. It's the convictions of things not seen, the Bible says. It's believing not only that God exists, Hebrews 11:6, but that he rewards those that seek him. Right? So it's believing that there is a God, but right, the demons, they believe and they shudder. Right? So it doesn't just stop there. I would say it doesn't even stop with believing that Jesus is the Son of God and that he died on the cross. Those are facts. And I guess because we're this far in history, we have to believe that that actually happened and trust that that actually happened. But that's only the beginning, believing that God exists. But we also believe that he rewards those who seek him. We trust him, right? Seeking God is actually a work of faith. It's an act of faith. Seeking him is faith. But here's the thing. When you know why you believe that God exists, it strengthens your faith. And what happens when your faith is strengthened? It strengthens your faith to seek him and to trust him and to take him at his word. And it takes us to a place where we can trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not on our own understanding. The more those puzzle pieces are in place, the more our faith is strengthened and the more we can trust him with our lives. Right? When we come to the Lord, when you first call upon the name of Jesus, man, you're a child of God, and that faith journey begins. And that's an act of surrender, and that's an act of trusting God and leaning not on your own understanding. But on my journey, I'm learning every day to trust him more and not to lean on my own understanding. Right? And that's as I work out my faith with fear and trembling. I'm learning how to trust him, how to depend on him, how to be loyal to him, how to be obedient to him. That is a journey. And that's why I'm doing this. Share with you. It encourages me, but it also, my hope is that it would encourage you to build your faith puzzle as well. Remember, you don't have to have all the pieces in place. There's still pieces missing in my puzzle, and I'm pretty sure that when I die, there's going to be pieces missing in my puzzle. I don't think it's until I meet him face to face, like Paul says, that I'm going to see the clear picture, right? But man, just like that image right there, right? I got more missing pieces than just one. But I can see that Jesus is Lord, right? Can you? I mean, is your faith blind? Is it passed down? I mean, that's a dangerous thing to say in church. I'm not encouraging you to walk away from the faith. I'm encouraging you to know the reasons that you believe that you believe. Know why you believe what you believe. You don't have to be a scientist, right? You don't have to be a speech therapist. Definitely don't have to be a pastor. We can know why we believe what we believe, right? And so for today, for me, I don't know the ins and outs of the human body. I'll probably go home and watch a documentary on it, babe. No, she talks to me enough about it. I love listening to that, but I couldn't sit there and voice everything that she did, right? But I know that the body is complex and intricate, and like she said, it's working for you, right? It's broken, and that's where God has people like her that come in a broken world and minister to those areas. But I know enough to say, hey, that's one of my reasons that I believe that there is a God, and I think that's pretty fascinating.